My sister hired private investigators to prove I was lying about my successful new life after cutting off my toxic family. She planned to expose me as a failure at my grandmother's birthday dinner, but their faces turned pale when the investigators' report landed on the table and revealed. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under my apartment door like a snake. Heavy, cream-colored paper with Anderson and Associates Private Investigation embossed in gold lettering across the top. Inside a single page, a subpoena requesting my presence at my grandmother's 80th birthday dinner, along with a photocopy of their investigation contract. My sister Jessica's signature sat at the bottom, bold and vindictive as ever. I hadn't spoken to my family in 4 years. Radio silence since the day I walked out of my parents' house in Ohio with nothing but 2 suitcases and my college acceptance letter. They told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life, that I'd come crawling back within 6 months, broke and desperate. My mother had actually laughed when I said I got a full scholarship to NYU. Jessica, 5 years older and golden child extraordinaire, had smirked from her perch on the leather sofa Dad bought her and said, "Good luck surviving in the real world, little mouse." Mouse. She'd called me that since we were kids, because I was quiet, because I read books instead of partying, because I didn't fight back when she borrowed my things and never returned them, because I was invisible in a family that valued volume and bravado above everything else. But I'd made it. Despite their predictions, despite their certainty I would fail, I'd actually made it. The scholarship had been real. The degree in computer science was real. The job offers were real. Everything they'd bet against had materialized exactly as I'd planned, and they knew nothing about it because I blocked every number, every email, every possible avenue of contact. Except now somehow they knew I was doing well. Well enough to hire investigators. Well enough to want to prove I was lying. I called the number on the letterhead. A woman with a professional monotone answered. "Anderson and Associates, how may I direct your call? I received a subpoena from your firm regarding an investigation." "One moment, please." Musak filled the silence. Then a male voice, gravelly and bored. "This is Mike Anderson." "Why am I being summoned to a birthday dinner?" He cleared his throat. "Ma'am, you're not being subpoenaed in a legal sense. Your family requested documentation of our investigation be presented at a family gathering. We're obligated to provide findings to the client at a requested time and place. You're welcome to attend or not, but the report will be delivered regardless." "What exactly did you investigate?" "I can't discuss specifics with anyone except the client. I can tell you the investigation focused on verifying claims about employment, residence, and financial status. Everything was conducted legally, using public records and standard surveillance." My stomach dropped. Surveillance. They'd been watching me, following me, documenting my life like I was some kind of criminal. "Who hired you?" I asked. "Specifically Jessica Holloway Morrison, your sister according to our client intake form. And she wants this presented at my grandmother's birthday dinner." "Correct. Next Saturday, 7:00 p.m., the Riverside Inn." I hung up without another word. My hands were shaking. The audacity of it was breathtaking. Jessica couldn't stand that I'd left. Couldn't tolerate the idea that I might actually be happy and successful without the family she'd spent her whole life using as a pedestal. She wanted to drag me back to that dinner table and humiliate me in front of everyone. Prove I was still the pathetic little mouse who couldn't survive on her own. The thing was, I hadn't lied about anything. Every single thing I told the few mutual acquaintances still connected to both worlds was true. I worked as a software engineer at a prominent tech company. I lived in a decent apartment in Brooklyn. I'd paid off my student loans early. I was doing better than fine. But Jessica didn't want the truth. She wanted ammunition. She wanted me to be the failure they'd all predicted. And when reality didn't cooperate, she paid someone to dig up dirt that would make her version of events more palatable. I had 6 days to decide whether to show up. 6 days to figure out if I wanted to face people who'd spent years making me feel worthless. People who'd never once asked how I was doing after I left. Who'd never apologized for the constant comparisons, the favoritism, the casual cruelty disguised as family dynamics. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is your cousin Melissa. Please come to Grandma's party. She asks about you all the time. She deserves to see you." Melissa and I had been close as kids, but she'd chosen sides when I left. Or rather, staying in the family fold meant automatically being on their side. I typed back. "Did you know Jessica hired investigators to follow me?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "What? No, that's insane." "Check with her. They are presenting a report at dinner. Lizzie, I swear I didn't know. But please still come. Grandma's not well. This might be her last birthday. The emotional blackmail was textbook. Come back for Grandma, who'd never stood up for me when Jessica was at her worst, who'd watched my parents shower my sister with praise and money while telling me I needed to be more realistic about my goals. Still, the thought of her dying before I could prove I'd made something of myself made my chest ache in an unexpected way. I spent Wednesday researching Anderson and Associates. They had a solid reputation, which meant their investigation would be thorough and accurate. They would have documented my morning subway rides to the office in Manhattan's financial district. They would have photographed me leaving my apartment building, a renovated brownstone I shared with 2 roommates. They would have verified my employment with Tech Corp, where I was now a senior engineer making a 6-figure salary. They would have pulled credit reports showing my excellent score and 0 debt. Everything Jessica wanted to disprove would instead be confirmed in black and white, compiled by the very people she'd paid thousands of dollars to expose me. The irony was delicious. Thursday evening, I got a call from my mother. I almost didn't answer, but morbid curiosity won out. Lizzie, is this you?" Her voice sounded older, frailer than I remembered. "It's me." "Oh, thank God. Jessica said she tracked down your number. Please tell me you're coming to Grandma's party. She's been asking for you constantly. She keeps saying she needs to see both her granddaughters before she goes." "Did Jessica mention why she wants me there?" A pause. "She said she wanted to reconnect, that enough time has passed and we should be a family again. She hired private investigators to follow me, Mom. She's planning to present the report at dinner." Silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "That's ridiculous. Why would she do that?" "Because she doesn't believe I'm actually doing well. She thinks I'm lying, and she wants to expose me in front of everyone." "Lizzie, that's paranoid. Jessica wouldn't." "There's a company name, a case number, everything. Call her and ask. Even if that were true, which I'm not saying it is, maybe she just wanted to find you. We've missed you, sweetheart. Your father asks about you, too." The casual dismissal of Jessica's behavior was so familiar, it almost made me laugh. Nothing my sister did was ever questioned, never examined, always rationalized away. Meanwhile, my decision to leave had been dissected and criticized for years. "I'll think about it," I said, and ended the call. Friday brought an email from Jessica herself. The subject line read, "Let's clear the air. Lizzie. I know we haven't spoken in forever, and I know things were difficult before you left, but I think we're both adults now, and we can move past old grievances. Grandma really wants to see you. I hired someone to find your contact info because I didn't know how else to reach you. Please come to dinner. We can start over. Jess." The gaslighting was almost impressive in its subtlety. She'd reframed the investigation as a benign attempt to reconnect, completely omitting the part where she'd planned a dramatic reveal at a family dinner. She was betting I didn't know the full scope of what she'd arranged, betting I'd show up unsuspecting and unprepared. I wrote back, "I'll be there." Her response came within minutes. "Thank God. See you tomorrow. It'll be good to catch up." Saturday arrived cold and gray, matching my mood. I spent 2 hours getting ready, choosing my outfit carefully. A simple black dress, expensive but understated, with pearl earrings I bought myself after my first big promotion. Professional, polished, successful. Everything they'd said I'd never be. My roommate Tasha knocked on my door around noon. "You sure you want to do this? You've been stress cleaning the kitchen since 6 a.m. I cleaned the kitchen. She laughed. Cleaned it, reorganized the pantry, and color-coordinated the spice rack. "You're nervous." "Of course I'm nervous. I'm walking into an ambush." Tasha leaned against the door frame, her dark eyes sympathetic. "Except you know it's an ambush, which means you're not really walking into anything. You're walking through it. Big difference." She was right. But knowing she was right didn't settle the churning in my stomach. I'd spent 3 years building a life separate from my family's judgment, and now I was voluntarily stepping back into their arena. Even with the truth on my side, even knowing Jessica's plan would backfire, the old dynamics were already trying to reassert themselves. The anxiety, the need to prove myself, the fear of not being enough. What if I freeze up? What if I get there and just revert to being that scared kid who couldn't stand up to them? Tasha came into the room and sat on my bed. "Lizzie, I've known you for 2 years. I've watched you negotiate with VPs who tried to steamroll you in meetings. I've seen you debug code that made senior developers cry. You literally gave a presentation to 300 people at that conference last month. You're not that scared kid anymore, even if they make you feel like her." But that's just it. They do make me feel like her. The second I hear Jessica's voice, I'm 12 again. Watching her get praised for a B- while I got lectured for an A. Then don't let her voice be the loudest one in your head. Your voice should be the loudest one. The voice that got you here, that kept you going when they said you'd fail. That's the voice you bring tonight. I nodded, trying to absorb the pep talk. Tasha squeezed my shoulder and left, but her words stayed with me as I finished getting ready. The voice that got me here. The one that had drowned out their doubt and dismissal for 3 years straight. By the time I called the car to take me to the train station, I'd talked myself through 17 different scenarios and backup plans. The 6-hour train ride to Ohio passed in a blur of rehearsed conversations and imagined confrontations. I kept pulling up photos on my phone, evidence of the life I'd built, my team at the Tech Corp holiday party, the award I'd received at the industry conference, screenshots of my patent applications, the article about the youth coding program that quoted me as founder and lead instructor. The physical proof helped. These weren't just claims or stories. They were documented, real, indisputable. Jessica could hire all the investigators she wanted. They'd only find more of the same. An elderly woman across the aisle noticed me obsessively scrolling through my photos. "Big day, honey. You look like you're going into battle." I smiled despite myself. Maybe I am. A very civilized dinner party kind of battle. She chuckled. "Those are the worst kind. At least in a real battle, you can see the enemy coming. At a dinner party, they smile while they stab you." That's exactly what I'm worried about. Well, you're dressed for it, and you've got that look in your eye. The kind that says you've already won. You're just showing up to collect the prize. She winked at me. "Give them hell, honey." The train pulled into the station 40 minutes before dinner. I timed it that way, intentionally giving myself a buffer, but not so much time that I'd sit in my rental car overthinking. The drive to the Riverside Inn took 15 minutes through streets I once knew by heart. Everything looked smaller than I remembered, more worn down. The coffee shop where I'd spent hours studying was now a vape store. The bookstore where I'd hidden from Jessica's friends was a tax preparation office. Coming back felt like visiting a museum of my own past. Everything preserved but lifeless, no longer relevant to who I'd become. I almost drove past my childhood home but stopped myself. Looking at it wouldn't change anything. It would only stir up memories I'd spent years processing. The Riverside Inn parking lot was already filling up with familiar cars. I recognized my uncle's ridiculous yellow Corvette, my aunt's minivan with the stick figure family decals, cousin Melissa's beat-up Honda with a Bernie sticker still on the bumper. 3 elections later. My parents' silver Mercedes sat close to the entrance with Jessica's white Range Rover right beside it. Of course, she'd parked next to them, maintaining the united front even in the parking arrangement. I sat in my rental car for 10 minutes watching people walk in. Aunt Caroline with her infamous green bean casserole, Uncle Tom and his new wife, whose name I could never remember, cousins I'd played with as kids now carrying their own children. A whole network of family that had continued without me, barely noticing my absence except as gossip fodder. My phone buzzed. A text from my friend Janelle back in Brooklyn. "Remember, you're a badass software engineer with patents and awards. They're just people who were wrong about you. Go show them how wrong." Another text, this one from my mentor at work, David. "Whatever you're walking into, you've got this. Call me if you need an exit strategy." The support from my chosen family, the people who knew me as I actually was, rather than who I'd been at 18, steadied something inside me. I checked my lipstick in the mirror, straightened my dress, and got out of the car before I could second-guess myself again. The Riverside Inn was exactly the kind of place my family loved. Ostentatious, without being truly elegant, expensive enough to impress, but lacking any real sophistication. The dining room was all dark wood and brass fixtures filled with extended family members I barely recognized. Grandma sat at the head of the table, smaller and more fragile than I remembered. Her face lit up when she saw me. "Lizzie, little Lizzie." I went to her and let her pull me into a hug that smelled like lavender and old memories. "Hi, Grandma." "Oh, you look so beautiful. So grown up. Where have you been, darling New York?" "I've been living in New York, doing what Tell Me Everything." Before I could answer, Jessica appeared at my elbow, looking immaculate in designer everything. Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Lizzie, you made it. Come sit. We saved you a spot." The seat was between her and my mother, directly across from my father and his barely concealed disapproval. The entire extended family watched us with varying degrees of curiosity and judgment. Aunts, uncles, cousins I'd spent Christmases and Thanksgivings with, all of them familiar strangers now. Dinner proceeded with excruciating small talk. What was I doing in New York? Where was I living? Was I seeing anyone? The questions felt like reconnaissance, gathering information to compare against whatever was in that report. Jessica kept checking her phone, smiling at some private joke. Dessert arrived, an elaborate cake with 80 candles that took 3 people to light. We sang happy birthday. Grandma teared up. And then Jessica stood, tapping her wineglass with a fork. Before we cut the cake, I have a special presentation. Grandma, we wanted to give you the gift of having your whole family together again. As you know, Lizzie left home 3 years ago, and we've all been so worried about her. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. My father's jaw was tight. We heard rumors she was doing well, but we didn't really know, and that uncertainty has been so hard on Mom and Dad, Jessica continued. So I took it upon myself to find out the truth. I hired a professional investigation firm to locate Lizzie and verify her situation because we love her, and we needed to know she was okay. She pulled a manila envelope from her bag, holding it up like a trophy. This report contains everything about Lizzie's current life, where she lives, where she works, her financial situation. I thought we could all hear the truth together. The room went silent. All eyes turned to me, waiting for the revelation, the exposure, the moment of judgment. Jessica's smile was triumphant as she opened the envelope and began reading. Subject Lizzie Marie Morrison. Current residence 347 Prospect Street, Brooklyn, New York. A shared apartment in a renovated brownstone. Her voice faltered slightly. Monthly rent $2.100. Subject's portion. She cleared her throat and continued. Employment. Senior software engineer at Tech Corp Industries. Employed since June 2023. Promoted to senior level January 2025. Her face had started to lose color. Annual salary. The papers trembled in her hands. Annual salary $145,000, plus benefits and stock options. A murmur rippled around the table. Credit report shows 0 outstanding debts. Student loans paid in full as of March 2024. Credit score 812. She stopped reading, staring at the page. What my mother demanded. How much? Jessica's voice came out barely above a whisper. Savings accounts totaling $73,000. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched the realization dawn on every face around the table. Jessica had paid someone to prove I was a failure, and instead she'd documented exactly how successful I had become. Every claim she'd wanted to debunk had been verified. Every lie she'd expected to expose was revealed as truth. But she kept reading, her voice shaking now. Subject has received 2 industry awards for software development. Is listed as lead developer on 3 patents filed by Tech Corp. Volunteers weekly at a youth coding program in Brooklyn. Has no criminal record, no outstanding legal issues, no debt, and maintains an active social life with multiple friend groups documented during surveillance. She looked up at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw something in Jessica's eyes that wasn't contempt or dismissal. It was fear. Fear that she'd miscalculated, that her perfect plan had backfired, that the little mouse had become something she couldn't control or diminish. I stood up slowly. Is there more in that report, Jessica? She flipped through the remaining pages, clearly looking for anything negative, any scrap of evidence that I wasn't as successful as the numbers indicated. Her hands were shaking. There's surveillance photos, you going to work at coffee shops, at the gym, living your life. My life, I said calmly. The life you didn't think I could build. The life you all said was impossible. When I left, you told me I'd fail within 6 months. Dad said I'd come crawling back, begging for help. Mom laughed at my scholarship. And you, Jessica, you called me a stupid little mouse who'd end up waitressing and living in a shoebox. I turned to address the whole table. I left because being part of this family meant being small. It meant accepting that Jessica was the successful one, the important one, the one who mattered. It meant listening to constant reminders that I wasn't good enough, smart enough, ambitious enough. So I left, and I built exactly the life I wanted, without any of your help, without any of your support, despite all your predictions. My father's face had turned red. You cut us off, he said. You disappeared without a word. I told you where I was going. I told you what I was doing. You chose not to believe me. You chose to make jokes about it, to place bets on how fast I'd fail. Did you think I didn't hear those conversations? Did you think your contempt was subtle? Melissa was crying quietly. A few aunts and uncles looked deeply uncomfortable. Grandma watched me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I picked up the report from where Jessica had dropped it on the table. Thank you for this, by the way. It's nice to have professional documentation of everything I've accomplished. I'm sure it cost you quite a bit. Several thousand probably to prove that your little sister wasn't lying, wasn't failing, wasn't the disaster you all predicted she'd be. Jessica finally found her voice. I just wanted to make sure you were safe. Don't! The word came out harder than I intended. Don't rewrite this now. You wanted to humiliate me. You wanted everyone here to see me exposed as a fraud. You wanted to drag me back into the family hierarchy where you're on top and I'm beneath you. But the investigator you hired told the truth. And the truth is that I'm doing better than you ever expected. I turned to my grandmother. Grandma, I love you. I'm sorry I haven't visited, but I needed to build a life where I wasn't constantly told I wasn't enough. I needed to prove to myself that I could do it alone, and I did. Grandma reached out and took my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. I'm proud of you, Lizzie, she said. I always knew you had steel in you. I'm sorry I didn't say it more when you were younger. The apology was unexpected and insufficient and still somehow meaningful. I squeezed her hand back. My mother tried next. Sweetie, if we made you feel that way, we didn't mean. Mom Jessica hired investigators to follow me. She planned this entire evening around exposing me as a liar in front of the whole family at Grandma's 80th birthday. And you're going to sit there and tell me you didn't mean to make me feel bad. She didn't have an answer for that. Neither did my father, who was staring at his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. I looked at each of them. My parents who'd never believed in me. My sister who'd built her identity on being better than me. My extended family who'd watched the dynamics play out for years without intervening. The disappointment I felt wasn't bitter anymore. It was just tired. I came tonight because Melissa said Grandma was asking for me, and because part of me wanted to show you that I'd made it, that you were wrong about me. But standing here now, I realize I don't need your validation. I never did. I just thought I did. And that made all the difference. I gathered my purse and coat. The report's yours, Jessica. Keep it. Frame it if you want. Show it to people when they ask about me. Tell them your little mouse sister turned out to be a senior software engineer with patents and awards and a life she built from scratch. Tell them she did it all without the family that said she couldn't. Halfway to the door, my father called out, Lizzie, wait. I turned back. He stood there, this man who had dismissed every achievement I'd earned, in favor of praising Jessica's mediocre accomplishments. For a moment he looked lost. I'm sorry, he said. I'm sorry we didn't see you. I'm sorry we made you feel like you had to prove anything. It was the first genuine apology I'd ever heard from him. It didn't erase the years of neglect, the constant comparisons, the casual cruelty, but it was something. Thank you, I said. I hope you mean that. I left before anyone else could speak, before Jessica could spin some new narrative, before my mother could try to smooth things over with empty reassurances. The cold air outside felt cleaner, somehow easier to breathe. My phone buzzed before I made it to the parking lot. From Melissa. That was the most badass thing I've ever seen. I'm sorry we weren't better to you. Then another text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Mike Anderson from the investigation firm. Just wanted to say, your sister's reaction when I delivered the full report yesterday was priceless. She actually tried to pay me to falsify findings. Thought you should know. Also impressive patent portfolio. I laughed. Actually laughed. Standing there in the parking lot of the Riverside Inn, Jessica had been so certain I was lying that she tried to bribe the investigator to create false evidence. The desperation of it was almost sad. Almost. I drove back to Brooklyn through light traffic, my phone blowing up with messages I'd read later maybe. The apartment was dark when I got home. My roommates were out for the evening. I changed into comfortable clothes, made tea, and sat by the window overlooking the street. I hadn't called home in 4 years. The report sat on my coffee table, this document that was supposed to destroy me, but instead had proven everything I'd worked for. I flipped through it, reading the dry, factual assessments of my life. The investigator had been thorough. Photos of me laughing with friends at a coffee shop, documentation of my volunteer work, even notes about my morning running routine in Prospect Park. One section near the end caught my eye. Subject appears well-adjusted and content. Multiple interviews with neighbors, colleagues, and acquaintances confirm subject is well-liked, reliable, and professionally respected. No evidence of fabrication or misrepresentation found in any aspect of subject's claimed lifestyle. Well-adjusted and content. Such simple words for such a hard-won state of being. My phone rang. Grandma's number. Hello, Lizzie. Grandma. Dear, I wanted to call before the night got too late. Are you all right? I'm okay, Grandma. I'm sorry if I ruined your birthday dinner. Ruined it, child. That was the most interesting birthday I've had in decades. Your sister's still in the bathroom crying. Your mother's lecturing your father about parenting failures. And half the family is arguing about who was meaner to you growing up. It's delightfully chaotic. Despite everything, I smiled. I didn't mean to cause chaos. Sometimes chaos is exactly what a family needs. She paused. Lizzie, I want you to know something. I knew you'd make it. Even when you were small, you had this determination in your eyes. I should have said something when they were hard on you. Should have stood up for you more. I'm an old woman with old regrets, but I want you to know I see you now. I always did, but I see you now more clearly. Tears pricked my eyes. Thank you, Grandma. Will you come visit me sometime, just you and me? No dramatic dinner parties. I'd like that. Good, now get some rest. I imagine today was exhausting. It had been exhausting and vindicating and strangely hollow. I'd proven my point, faced my family, watched Jessica's plan crumble in her hands. But sitting there in my apartment, I felt less triumphant than simply relieved it was over. Over the next few weeks, things shifted in unexpected ways. Melissa started texting regularly, actually interested in my life, rather than just gathering information to report back. A few cousins reached out with genuine apologies. My mother sent a long email acknowledging her failings, asking if we could rebuild slowly. Jessica never contacted me directly. I heard through Melissa that she told everyone the investigator had misrepresented his findings, that the report was inaccurate, that I must have staged everything. The denial was predictable, but ultimately irrelevant. The people who mattered knew the truth. My father sent a single text 6 weeks after the dinner. Your mother and I would like to take you to dinner sometime. Just us. No expectations. We want to know who you've become. I thought about it for 3 days before responding. Maybe in a few months. I need more time. His reply was immediate. Whenever you're ready, we'll be here. The thing about revenge is that it's supposed to feel satisfying, like the final chapter closing on a painful story. But standing in that dining room watching Jessica's face as she read through documentation of my success, I'd felt less like a victor and more like someone who'd simply survived. The validation was real, but it didn't heal the years of damage. It didn't erase the internalized voice that still sometimes whispered I wasn't enough. The drive back to Brooklyn should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt wrung out, exhausted in a way that went deeper than physical tiredness. I stopped at a rest stop an hour into the drive and sat in my car, staring at the fluorescent lights of the gas station, trying to process everything that had happened. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since I left the restaurant. I finally looked at the messages, scrolling through them with a strange detachment. From Melissa? That was incredible. Jessica locked herself in the bathroom for 30 minutes. Mom's having a meltdown. Dad looks like he's aged 10 years. I'm proud of you. From Aunt Caroline, I owe you an apology. We all do. I should have said something years ago when I saw how they treated you. I was a coward. From Uncle Tom, your grandmother hasn't stopped smiling. She told everyone you were her favorite granddaughter after you left. First time I've ever heard her pick favorites. From a number I didn't recognize. This is your cousin Brandon. I moved to Seattle 2 years ago for similar reasons. Different details, same family dynamics. Coffee sometime. The messages kept coming. A flood of reactions and apologies and attempts to reconnect. People who'd watched me struggle. Who'd witnessed the favoritism and the casual cruelty. Who'd stayed silent because it was easier than confronting the dysfunction. Now they wanted absolution. Wanted to be on the right side of the story. Wanted to claim they'd always believed in me. I turned my phone off completely and went into the rest stop, bought terrible coffee and a stale sandwich I didn't eat. Sat at a plastic table bolted to the floor. A trucker at the next table was arguing with someone on the phone about delivery schedules. A family with 3 kids was trying to wrangle everyone back into their minivan. Normal people living normal lives unburdened by the weight of family history and complicated reconciliations. What the evening had done wasn't give me closure. It didn't wrap everything up neatly or erase the past. What it did do was prove I could trust myself, that when everyone else had been wrong about me, I'd been right, that the choice to leave to start over to build something new had been the correct one, even when it was terrifying and lonely and uncertain. I got back on the road around midnight, the highway mostly empty except for long-haul trucks and the occasional speeding sedan. The radio played quietly some late-night jazz program that required no attention. My mind wandered through the evening, replaying moments with strange clarity, the way my father's hands had clenched when I mentioned their betting on my failure. The sound of Jessica's voice cracking as she read through the financial information. My mother's tears, which I still couldn't tell were genuine or performative. Grandma's unexpected pride, which had touched something I thought was too scarred over to feel. But more than any of that, I kept returning to the moment when Jessica had looked at me across that table. I'd seen fear in her eyes, not anger, not contempt, fear. Because her entire identity had been built on being better than me. smarter than me, more successful than me. And in one evening, that foundation had cracked. I didn't feel sorry for her. I wasn't ready for that level of empathy yet, but I understood something I hadn't before. Her need to keep me small had never really been about me. It had been about her own insecurity, her own fear that without someone to be better than she wasn't anything special at all. The realization didn't excuse her behavior, but it did contextualize it in a way that made it feel less personal. She hadn't tried to destroy me because I deserved it. She tried to destroy me because she was afraid of her own inadequacy. When I finally pulled into my street in Brooklyn around 3 a.m, I felt hollowed out and somehow lighter at the same time. The apartment was dark. I didn't turn on the lights, just sat on the couch in the dimness, letting my eyes adjust, letting the familiar shadows of my own space settle around me like a blanket. This was real. This apartment, this life, this version of myself that I'd built from determination and spite and stubborn hope. It wasn't perfect. I still had moments of doubt, still heard echoes of their voices telling me I wasn't good enough. But those voices were getting quieter, drowned out by evidence and achievement, and the simple fact of my continued existence on my own terms. Around 4 a.m, I finally went to bed too tired to shower or change properly. I fell asleep within minutes, deeply and dreamlessly, the kind of sleep that comes after something has finally been finished. The next morning, Sunday, I woke late to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window and the smell of coffee from the kitchen. Tasha was making breakfast when I shuffled out, still wearing yesterday's dress, my hair a disaster. "How'd it go?" she asked, sliding a mug toward me. I took a long sip before answering. Jessica hired investigators to prove I was lying about my life. She planned to expose me in front of everyone at dinner. The report she paid thousands for confirmed everything I said was true. She had to read it out loud to the whole family. Tasha's eyes went wide. "You're kidding." I have a copy in my purse, complete with surveillance photos and financial verification. She started laughing and couldn't stop. "That's the most spectacular own goal I've ever heard of. Please tell me you have video." "Better." I have the memory of her face when she realized what she'd done. We spent the next hour at the kitchen table while I recounted the entire evening, Tasha interjecting with increasingly delighted commentary. Our other roommate, Marcus, woke up halfway through and made pancakes while listening to the story, shaking his head in disbelief. "Your family is wild," he said finally, like respectfully, completely unhinged. "I know," I said. "That's why I left." "But you went back," Tasha pointed out. "You could have ignored the whole thing, stayed home, let Jessica present her report to an empty chair. But you went back and faced them." I hadn't thought about it that way. "I guess I needed to see their faces," I said. "Needed them to see mine. Needed to know that I knew what they tried to do and that it failed." "Closure," Marcus said sagely, flipping a pancake. "You needed closure." "Maybe. Or maybe I needed to prove something to myself. That I could go back to that place and not disappear into the person they expected me to be." The conversation drifted to other topics, but I kept thinking about Marcus's word. Closure. Was that what last night had been? It didn't feel finished exactly. The messages on my phone suggested it was more of a beginning than an ending. A door opening onto complicated reconciliations and difficult conversations. But something had shifted. Some weight I'd been carrying without realizing it had been set down. I'd stopped waiting for them to believe in me, stopped needing their validation, and in doing so, I'd taken away their power to define my worth. 3 months after the birthday dinner, I got promoted to lead engineer. The day I signed the paperwork, I sent Grandma a photo of my new office with a view of the Manhattan skyline. She texted back, "Knew you would. So proud. Come visit soon." I did visit, driving back to Ohio on a Saturday morning with coffee and bagels from her favorite place that I'd spent an hour tracking down in Brooklyn. We sat in her garden and talked about everything except my family. She told me about her own mother, who'd discouraged her from going to college. Told me she'd spent years wondering what she could have been if she'd been braver. "You were brave," she said, squeezing my hand. "You did what I didn't. That matters more than you know." Jessica's name came up eventually. Grandma sighed. "She's struggling. The whole situation forced her to look at herself, and she doesn't like what she sees. Your mother says she's in therapy." "Good," I said, and meant it. Not with satisfaction, but with genuine hope that she might find whatever peace she needed. "Do you think you'll ever forgive them?" Grandma asked. "Really forgive them?" I considered the question carefully. I think forgiveness isn't one moment. It's lots of small choices. I'm choosing not to carry the anger anymore. Whether that's the same as forgiveness, I don't know yet. She nodded like she understood. "That's fair. That's more than fair, actually." The drive back to Brooklyn felt different this time. less like fleeing and more like returning home by choice. My phone buzzed as I crossed into New York State. A text from Melissa family group chat says Jessica is planning Thanksgiving. Would you come if we promise no drama? I pulled into a rest stop to think about it. Thanksgiving. The holiday that had always highlighted every family dysfunction, every comparison, every careful navigation of Jessica's ego and my parents' obliviousness. The idea of voluntarily walking back into that made my stomach clench. But maybe it was time to stop giving them the power to define those spaces. Maybe I could show up as exactly who I was. Now take up space without apologizing and leave whenever I wanted. On my terms, not theirs. Maybe I texted back, ask me again in October. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. It was the beginning of something new. Something I was building just like everything else in my life. Carefully, deliberately. On my own foundation. The investigation report still sat in my desk drawer. This accidental document of vindication that Jessica had gifted me through her own spite. Sometimes I pulled it out and read through it, reminding myself that every single thing in those pages was real, was mine, was earned. But mostly I didn't need it anymore. The proof wasn't in the documented salary or the verified accomplishments. It was in the quiet confidence I felt walking through my neighborhood, in the work I did that challenged and fulfilled me, in the life I'd built that fit me like something made to order. Jessica had hired investigators to prove I was lying, to expose me as a fraud, to drag me back down to where she'd always believed I belonged. Instead, she'd paid thousands of dollars to document the truth, that the little mouse had found her roar, built her kingdom, and didn't need anyone's permission to thrive. And that more than any dramatic dinner revelation or tearful apology was the real victory. Not proving them wrong, but proving myself right. Not their validation, but my own unshakable knowledge that I was exactly who I'd set out to become. The girl who left with 2 suitcases and a scholarship had become a woman with patents and awards and a savings account and a life she'd chosen. Some fairy tales are about princes and castles. Mine was about leaving home, finding myself, and learning that the best revenge is building something so solid, so real, so undeniably yours that nobody can take it away. Not even the sister who tried. The conversation drifted into memory as the weeks passed, not as a sharp pain, but as something dull and settled. Life resumed its familiar rhythm. Work deadlines, morning runs, coffee with friends, the steady hum of a life that no longer felt like it needed to be justified to anyone. The investigation report stayed in my desk drawer. Sometimes I pulled it out and flipped through it, not because I needed proof anymore, but because it reminded me of how far I'd come. Dry pages filled with facts and figures that somehow told the story of a girl who refused to disappear. Lizzie Marie Morrison, senior software engineer, financially stable, well-adjusted, and content. I smiled every time I read that line. Jessica never reached out. Not once. Through Melissa, I heard fragments. She told people the investigator must have been wrong, that I'd staged everything, that the numbers couldn't possibly be accurate. The denial followed her everywhere, a shadow she dragged behind her. It wasn't my problem anymore. My father and mother remained tentative presences at the edges of my life. Occasional messages, careful phrasing, acknowledgement without expectation. It was strange seeing them unsure around me for the first time. Strange, but not unpleasant. The biggest change was internal. I no longer felt the instinctive tightening in my chest when my phone buzzed with a family name. I no longer rehearsed explanations for my choices. I no longer measured my worth against the yardstick they'd used my entire childhood. I'd stopped waiting for permission. 3 months after the dinner, my promotion became official. Lead engineer, new responsibilities, new challenges. The work was demanding and exhilarating, and for the first time, success didn't feel like defiance. It felt like alignment. I sent Grandma a photo of my office view. Manhattan stretched out beneath a pale winter sky. Knew you would, she texted back, so proud. Come visit soon. When I did visit, it wasn't for a holiday or a family obligation. It was just us. Coffee in the morning, her garden in the afternoon. Stories that didn't revolve around conflict or comparison. She told me about the dreams she'd put aside, the regrets she carried quietly. I listened in a way I never had before, not as a child seeking approval, but as an adult sharing space. You were brave, she said again, squeezing my hand. You did what I didn't. That mattered more than she knew. On the drive back to Brooklyn, I thought about forgiveness, about how it wasn't a grand gesture or a declaration, but a slow loosening of grip. I wasn't carrying the anger anymore. I wasn't feeding it or revisiting it. I was choosing day by day to move forward without it. When Melissa texted about Thanksgiving, I didn't feel dread. I felt curiosity. Ask me again in October, I replied. It wasn't a promise, it was possibility. Back in my apartment, life continued to fill the space where resentment used to live. Work that challenged me, friends who knew me, quiet evenings that felt earned, confidence that didn't need to be announced. Jessica had hired investigators to prove I was lying, to expose me, to shrink me back into the role she needed me to play. Instead, she'd paid to document the truth, that I was real, that my life was real, that my success wasn't a performance or a rebellion, but the natural outcome of persistence and self-belief. The little mouse hadn't disappeared. She'd grown teeth, and a voice, and a future that belonged only to her. Not because she'd proven anyone wrong, but because she'd finally proven herself right.